Okay, so this is like a little kind of, should we say, business introduction to this chapter. Now, the chapter's database analytics, and for those of you who've like worked in databases, you'll probably realize that it doesn't actually have anything very much to do with databases. And it's a general kind of, intro to managing and manipulating data in Excel. Now, having said that, given the nature of the class, I don't want to start, doing lots of material that doesn't follow the textbook. But I would like to give a little bit of a business kind of introduction to databases. Now, as this really isn't in the beyond this definition from the textbook, the rest of the presentation is kind of just a few of my thoughts on data and databases. So, consider that to be kind of an optional thing. Beyond this kind of slide, the presentation is not going to be in the exam. So, when we think of data, we could think of lots of things. We could think of numeric data, for example, stock prices over time. We could think, for example, of categorical data. For example, people would be single or married. They may belong to a certain ethnic group. And we also might think of, for example, text data, unstructured data such as social network data. So there's kind of a wide variety of data. And though in this class, we're probably going to focus on, simple numeric and categorical data. Now, a database, I'm going to say a little bit kind of broader than the definition of the book. The database is just really a method of storing data. What the definition from the book is something called a relational database. And I'll talk a little bit more as we go along. But i.e. data is stored in tables. So if you have a customer system, you might have a table for the different accounts. You might have a table for the different contacts within the accounts. You might have a table for your salespeople. And the idea is this data is kind of organized and linked together, so then you can extract the data that you want from the databases. So I'm going to kind of start off with a little bit of an example. This is kind of a little bit from my kind of commercial experience. But this idea of customer relationship management. And the idea is that we have some sort of a database of our sales process. Now, that could include stuff like, um, you know, your sales accounts, your contacts, your salespeople, financial information like current business, customer service information, how often we've contacted different companies, might have information on marketing campaigns. So it has a lot of information on the whole customer process. And it's generally used, understanding your customers, i.e. if customers start, not renewing their contracts, we could look at the customer information. We could start contacting customers who we feel maybe are going to drop out. Can help us with our marketing. We could maybe do cross-selling campaigns. So I used to work for Dow Jones Newswires, and the predominant business was like selling news services to kind of the big investment merchant banks. So imagine I'm selling a service on equity news, and I feel that most of these banks need both equity and commodity news. So if we've got a bank that doesn't have commodity news, then we'd actually give them a special deal on that commodity news. Again, we could look at the way related to this, the ways of our service provisions, and it helps us manage the customer process. So I think a lot of the impetus of CRM systems is companies wanted to get away from this idea of a salesperson on commission contacts a customer, tries their best to get the sale, gets the sale, gets their commission, and then leaves them well alone. In the modern sales processes, there's a lot of different touch points with the customer, both kind of pre-sales and after sales in terms of support and in terms of like customer service. So let's just kind of get through this idea of what a database is to do with CRM. This is something called a filofax, which a few of you may remember or may not remember. But it's basically what a salesperson would have. They'd have all their contact information, and in a way, your contact information as a salesperson was almost like your value on the market. If you had a lot of good contacts in your filofax, then you were maybe quite a valuable salesperson. So this is completely offline. Now we kind of get to the stage. This is like an incredibly old version of Microsoft Outlook. And this is like, this would eventually go online. You would have this stored on your computer. You would integrate it with your email. You would integrate it maybe with the web. But things were still kind of relatively siloed in that each salesperson might have their own kind of sales contacts and write their own notes on those sales contacts. So we go boldly into the 90s, and this was like 20 years ago. I worked on a system called Sales Logics, which was one of the big players in the CRM market at the moment. It's no longer around. It's now called Infor CRM, and it's certainly not the biggest player in the market. But at the time, this was like pretty revolutionary. You could organize your sales process. You had a list of your contacts. You could get a list of tasks, marketing campaigns. You could set up some process workflow. For example, if we have a new client, we could have a salesperson contact them. We could have a technical support person contact them. We could have interesting information about the client. Do they have kids? What baseball team do they support? Anything that can help, like felicit conversations. So it's something that used data to kind of help manage and improve the sales process. Having said that, okay, and at the core of this was a database. Now, again, we do have a very good database class on the MBA program, which is optional. And again, as I said, I don't want to get into this trap of trying to start doing lots of material that's not really in the course and trying to implement relational databases in the course. But the idea here is we store the information. And for example, this thing called, each table is going to have something called a primary key, which identifies the information in the table. So here we have the account key, and then we have some interesting information about the name, description, phone, address. Now, in reality, in a commercial CRM system, there would literally be like at least 50 fields for the account, but this is like a simplified version. And we also have like contacts of sales contacts. The sales contacts may be a sales manager at the merchant. Say I'm Dow Jones at the merchant bank I'm trying to sell to. It may be a commodities trader. It may be a technical support person. The idea about good CRM is you would actually have contacts at different touch points or levels in the company. And you see here there's a relationship with the account table, and this is actually called a foreign key, in which we have the account information linked to the contact. So the idea is when we're reporting, we may be reporting, say how many contacts did we contact in the last 5 days by account. We could actually get that information, both contact and account information, merged together in some sort of report. And you see, you've got the contract information linked with the account. We have various marketing campaigns, and each campaign is has a campaign member, a salesperson, and that's linked to contacts. It's linked to sales leads. So you can see here, this is like the whole sales process. This is a very, very simplified version. If you looked at the database schema for a CRM system, it would be literally lots of tables, and each table has about 100 fields. But I think this gives you the idea without me trying to, diverge onto a database course. And going back to the 1990s, this is how databases worked. You would literally have a database in each office, and in each office you would also have a synchronization server, and some of the salespeople out in the field would also have their own little mini databases. So I recall at Dow Jones was split up by region. So we'd have major servers in each of the major capitals, So Europe and EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa region. Um, Basically, there would be some places that didn't have an office, but we'd have roaming salespeople, and there would be remote offices, remote users, and they would all kind of log into these kind of servers, and there would be like this kind of synchronization server that kind of updated all the information from the various sub databases. So the idea is you might have, for example, Merrill Lynch, and they've got offices in London, Paris, and Frankfurt. And salespeople are entering information in each of these three offices, and we'd synchronize between the databases and merge any new information, and then kind of send it back out to the offices. So the idea is we have lots of physical databases, but we kind of merge and try and make consistent. So we have like a single copy of the data that kind of replicates to different offices. Now, this process was an absolute nightmare, because you can imagine, if for example, people in two different offices put different information about an account in, and then, how do we deal with clashes? How do we deal with somebody deleting a file and another person adding the same file? And quite often this process became a huge mess. So this is what's called in IT, this is called a client server architecture, plus we're synchronizing, and this is rarely used anymore. We've gone more towards a cloud infrastructure. So this is kind of the modern version, and this is a cloud database. And basically, we have like somewhere Salesforce.com, which is a major kind of CRM provider and probably the leader at the moment. They would have a huge data server plant somewhere, and you would access it via the web. And Salesforce kind of basically host all the databases for lots of different companies all in one place. And so, or possibly kind of multiple server farms all kind of merged together in this cloud. But the idea is you have a cloud and you have access to the cloud. So if I'm a company like Dow Jones with offices all over the place, we're connecting to a single version of the database remotely all the time. So this kind of avoids the problems of having lots of versions of your database. So you can see here, this is a nice little diagram. We've got our clouds. We maybe have our sales databases up here. And, we can connect to it via computers, remote laptops, via my cell phone, via tablets. And everybody's going to see the same version of the data. We don't have as many data quality issues. Now, in fact, Salesforce has gone from being a simple CRM provider to a huge kind of cloud services provider. They provide, based on your corporate data, they provide marketing services, sales data, a lot of like analytics. Salesforce have a lot of maybe social media analytics. They would also have collaboration tools, which would kind of expand what's in CRM. So it's basically, getting different business teams working together on the same data. Maybe you could have product development people working with sales people, working with marketing people to help design new product concepts. So let me just kind of go to the Salesforce. You've got you just go to Salesforce.com. Salesforce have been incredibly successful. They have lots of marketing information up. They are the #1 CRM, and they're also being a general cloud services provider. Again, if you type in Salesforce in YouTube, you get kind of lots of videos both on what Salesforce does and also kind of some general, business tricks which involve using their products. So they've got actually quite a lot of good content up on the corporate website. And I just kind of put up, I talked about my CRM experience. This is the successor to the CRM that I used. And basically, they've gone on the cloud as well. So the future in terms of these big kind of database systems is very definitely on. Okay, this is another use of CRM systems. This is like evaluating salespeople. And I think I mentioned how Salesforce evaluation has become broader. Even a long way back when I was like working tech in a sales team, they realized that by focusing on paying salespeople by the amount of new business they brought in, salespeople were liable to, shall we say, not give good service. They're going to focus all of their efforts on getting that new business rather than keeping existing customers. So the idea is that salespeople are evaluated and paid. Some of it's obviously based on their sales, but also on kind of a range of metrics. Um, and it's like how many referrals they have, their general satisfaction score from the clients, net promoter score. This is like an interesting one. This is just a concept from marketing, and it's like one single question: how likely are you to recommend? Or will you recommend this person or this product to other people? So would you actually recommend this? And the net promoter score is just the difference between the positive and the negative. If it's 100, it's like 100% of people would recommend you. If it's negative, 100% of people would not recommend you. And this was just the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I said Salesforce now have a lot of different business functionality on the cloud. It's almost like a general business process system like SAP. But for example, marketing, we have things like we have marketing applications for social, for mobile, traditional email, how to personalize content to different consumers. There's probably some segmenting to different consumers. Something for developing advertising and web advertising. So there's a range of different utilizing the CRM database as a range of different kind of features in the Salesforce cloud. So here are a few of the links. I kind of showed you a few of these before. Okay, so we'll finish off with a couple of definitions. Just like, what is a database? So this is what the book actually calls a database. I'm going to be narrow and say this is a relational database. So I've defined it as a collection of data items or tables. You've got links and relationships between these tables. And usually they're linked with these things I talked about called keys. And we also have indices or indexes, which are just ways of organizing the data on the database. So for example, if I want to get through, if I want to retrieve quickly, I might want to order all my articles via a certain customer ID or something. But that's kind of more from the technical side of things. Now, there's also something called SQL, or structured query language, and this is the language used to extract information from these databases. So I might, for example, want to, all the accounts that have not renewed in the last 6 months, all my business accounts, all my banks, if I'm Dow Jones, I might want to kind of get a list of contacts of a certain type. Maybe I want to get a list of technical contacts at all these people who have stopped renewing. And then I would actually try and email those technical contacts to say, hey, is there anything wrong with our technical service? But, SQL is just this language where we're selecting information from the database, and we actually, can select information across multiple tables. So I said we could get contacts for certain kinds of accounts. We could maybe get a list of salespeople who are doing particularly good business and have high customer satisfaction scores. So it's just kind of a language for extracting information. And again, it's not something we're going to cover in this course, but be aware that it's available, and be aware of this. If you're kind of taking this MBA straight after your bachelor's, be aware that this is a useful skill. I've seen a lot of even general marketing jobs that beyond basic survey design and statistics, they actually like people to know SQL and databases. So even if you decide not to take the database class as part of your MBA program, you might actually want to check this out, spend 3 days on a mini course and then just put this, just put the skill on your CV. Okay, where were we? And so we have relational databases and SQL. And I just showed you a few of the major databases. We have Microsoft Access. And this is just basically a relational database. It's part of Office. It's generally used, for freestanding applications where somebody has a database on their computer and they access it via their computer. It's more sophisticated these days, but that's still the main use for Microsoft Access. And the main thing is it's actually free with Microsoft Office, and it's relatively simple. Microsoft SQL Server. Now, Microsoft SQL Server is Microsoft's own enterprise database, and I've got you a link there. There's actually a free version of this, and SQL Server is mainly used, almost for distributed applications. So if you've got a company and you have maybe a database for maybe something to do with finance or CRM, basically anybody in the company can access to this database. Again, a lot of these traditional database systems for large databases are now on the cloud, but they still have their uses. Oracle, again, it's a major corporate database, major corporate competitor. And Microsoft SQL Server have a cut-down free version, but MySQL is basically a free kind of enterprise database system. So again, these are interesting things, even if you're not going to work widely with databases. They're interesting things to know and check out. Just some other terminology. A NoSQL database refers to a database, funnily enough, that does not use SQL and basically doesn't use tables. So we can refer to a lot of different things, but quite often it will refer to databases that can have unstructured data. So for example, MongoDB allows the storage of documents and kind of structured document data. But it just is just any database that doesn't have that traditional table structure I showed you. A cloud database, data are more and more stored in the cloud. And then we access this cloud through, and again, beyond the scope of this class, there's a protocol called SOAP. But you would basically have some sort of programming language and you'd program through the cloud, or you could access through the cloud, or you would have some sort of web application. Salesforce have a web application that would do all of this kind of for you. And we don't really deal with huge data, but quite often, if I have a massive database with billions and billions of rows, trying to deal with that on a computer at once would just crash my computer. So we have this set of processes called MapReduce, and it splits the data into small chunks. We process the data in parallel on these chunks. The server side of this is called Hadoop servers, and then we combine the results. So if we can't do something on one computer, we split it across lots of computers and do it in parallel. Okay, and so that was my little intro to databases. I also kind of gave you that link here towards data science, and that's actually kind of quite a cool little article that just lists. Again, you don't need to be if you're not a database expert, but if you're in a corporation and you want to at least think you know a little bit about databases, this is just a really nice article talking about the range of databases, talking about how a lot of databases are now via the web through kind of clouds, goes through all the different alternatives, and talks a little bit about these new, NoSQL databases where we have large kind of maybe unstructured data, kind of structured or unstructured data. We've got social media, we've got documents, which we want to put in a database. Okay, and that was pretty much it. I just wanted to give kind of, since our database chapter didn't have much on databases, I just wanted to give you kind of, almost like an optional broad introduction to databases from